Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into something pretty profound, a body of knowledge that, well, many say is the oldest in human history. We've got insights here from a source called War Konkono, called Kono, which translates to Vedas, divine source of eternal knowledge. And our goal really is to unpack what the Vedas are supposed to be, what makes them unique according to this source, their origins, and why they're seen as this enduring source of wisdom. Get ready for maybe a few shifts in how you see things.
Oh, definitely. You're likely to find that this ancient wisdom, as presented here, it really challenges some common ideas we have about knowledge, about where it comes from and how it's passed down.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. The word Veda, what does it actually mean? And why does our source stress that it's like more than just old writings?
Right, so fundamentally, Veda means knowledge. Simple as that. It comes from the Sanskrit root vid, which just means to know. But the key point in our source is that the Vedas are described not just as knowledge, but as the eternal knowledge of God, an omnipresent, omniscient God. And this knowledge was apparently given to humans right at the start of creation.
Wow, okay, that's a big claim right there. Not just a book, but eternal knowledge from the get-go. So how does something like that, something eternal, become something we can actually, grasp? How does it manifest?
That's a great question, and it's a crucial distinction the source makes. They aren't just books. They represent that eternal knowledge. So when you translate this knowledge into sound, to an audible form, it becomes specific sounds. And when you put it into a visible form, like writing, it becomes these very precise mantras. And those are compiled into what we now call the Veda Samhitas. You could maybe think of it like a person, right? Their voice represents them when you hear it. And a photo, a 2D image, is a pretty accurate representation when you see it. So similarly for the Vedas, this eternal knowledge gets translated into these four samhitas, something our human senses can actually perceive.
That's an interesting way to put it. Knowledge taking form in sound and sight. So it's not just a jumble of ancient ideas then. There's a specific structure. These Veda Samhitas you mentioned.
Exactly. It's highly structured. The knowledge is compiled into four distinct parts. These Veda Samhitas, you have the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. And what's really unique about the verses within them is that they're specifically called mantras. This is different from, say, shlokas you find in other Sanskrit texts. And these mantras, according to the source, are totally unchangeable. Not just the words, the content, but the exact pronunciation. Every single syllable has a very specific way it needs to be pronounced, often shown by little marks above and below the letters, like musical notation almost.
Okay, hold on. So it's not just what is being said, but precisely how it sounds. What does that level of meticulous detail suggest to you about how this knowledge was viewed?
It strongly implies that the sound itself is integral, that it carries meaning, carries power, that the form and content are kind of inseparable for the knowledge to be fully transmitted. Which, naturally, leads us to the next big question. Where did all this come from? How did such precise knowledge just appear? Well, the source material is quite clear on this. It states the Vedas were first revealed. Not written, but revealed. In the hearts of four specific rishis, or seers, right at the very beginning of civilization. These rishis, their names were Agni, Vayu, Aditya, and Angira, were supposedly the best of the best. They had the qualities needed to actually understand this divine knowledge and then, crucially, explain it to others.
Revealed in their hearts, okay, and this is tied into a cyclical view of creation, right? So in each new beginning, how were these particular individuals chosen? And did they each get the whole thing, or?
Yeah, good point. In this cyclical model, yes, whenever a new creation cycle begins, the souls considered most suitable, most pure, are chosen to be the first humans. They're the ones best equipped to receive and then spread this foundational knowledge. And each of these four rishis received a specific Veda. So Agni got the Rig Veda, Vayu got the Yajur Veda, Aditya the Sama Veda, and Angira received the Atharva Veda. And here's something really fascinating the source emphasizes. The revelation wasn't piecemeal. It came as a complete package. The mantra, its meaning, and its precise pronunciation all revealed and understood as one single unified thing. Now to us, with our, limited everyday understanding, language, meaning, sound, they seem like separate bits. But the idea here is that in a state of perfection, a heightened state of awareness, they become one inseparable reality. Think about it like a baby calling a ma for its mother, the sound ma, the meaning mother, the feeling, the need. It's all one intense, unified experience for the child, right? So similarly, the source suggests, when the mind is pure, totally focused, free of negativity, the language, the sound, the meaning of God's knowledge are experienced as one integrated whole. And these four rishis were supposedly in that kind of elevated state.
That's quite a concept. The idea that language itself, in its purest form, originated right there. So these rishis didn't just receive it, they then had to basically develop the rules to teach it, laying the foundation for communication.
Exactly that. And from this core knowledge, the inspiration for noble actions for building a society also arose naturally in virtuous people. These first four rishis then trained others. That was the beginning, the spark for developing civilization. And later on, other scholars, people who really dedicated themselves to studying and meditating on the meanings of specific Vedic mantras, they also earned the title of rishi. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, the source presents the Vedas as the absolute first source of all knowledge for humanity. It argues that if you look back through history, any period, there's no evidence suggesting the Vedas didn't exist. They're described as always being there, the oldest known knowledge.
Okay, so that brings up a really important point for you listening. Why should we care about something described as being so ancient, so foundational? What's the relevance today of a knowledge system presented as unchanging, maybe even the ultimate source of truth?
Well, the source connects it to the nature of God and truth itself. It reasons like this. Entities are known by their qualities, right? Eternal beings have eternal qualities. Since God is described as eternal, then his knowledge must also be eternal. It can't be temporary or change over time. So the Vedas, in this view, contain absolute, universally correct truths and principles. And truth itself is eternal. It doesn't change. So that's another reason they're considered eternal. And the Rig Veda specifically is often cited as the single oldest text known to humankind, which then leads to a pretty bold claim in the source material. It asks, can any other text legitimately claim to be a divine revelation from God in the same way? And the source answers, well, no. The reasoning is that any other book, one that appears after humans have already been around for a while, needs language to be written, right? But that language would have had to develop before the book was created. Whereas in this perspective, the very origin of language is found within the Vedas themselves as part of that initial revelation.
Right. It's crucial we make clear this is the perspective from the source we're analyzing. It frames the Vedas uniquely. It positions them as the singular divine revelation, explicitly contrasting them with later texts seen as human creations. This is a core argument presented. So, following that logic, what's the implication of God giving this knowledge only at the very beginning?
The argument presented is one of divine justice and mercy. For God to be fair to everyone, he had to provide this essential knowledge right at the start of creation. Because if you revealed it, say, halfway through human history, what about all the people who lived and died before that revelation? Wouldn't that be unjust to them? So the source contends that no other text meets this criterion of being there, universally, from the absolute beginning. Therefore, within this specific framework we're exploring, only the Vedas are considered the authentic, direct word of God. All other texts are described as human-authored, valuable perhaps, but not comparable in that specific claim to divine origin and authenticity. The Vedas are presented as this permanent, eternal knowledge that just naturally appeared along with creation itself.
That's a really strong claim about the source of everything, knowledge, language. Wow. But here's another fascinating point the source makes, and it feels a bit strange at first. It says the Vedas contain no history. For ancient texts, that seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does, on the surface. But it actually fits perfectly with their described nature if you think about it. Remember, they were supposedly revealed right at the dawn of creation, before humans had really done much to create history. Human actions, choices, mistakes, triumphs, that's what makes up history, right? And that's all subject to human free will. God, it said, gave humans that freedom. The Vedas, on the other hand, deal with eternal truths, unchanging laws and principles of the universe, of existence. So they wouldn't concern themselves with the shifting sands of human actions, things that change based on our choices. They're the user manual for the cosmos, handed out before the users even started messing things up or building things. They stick to the fundamental rules, not the player's game history.
Okay, that explanation makes a lot of sense. The blueprint, not the diary. But this leads to something maybe even more amazing. How on earth were these texts with their exact sounds, exact meanings, preserved for thousands of years without getting corrupted?
Ah, yes. This is potentially one of the most mind-boggling aspects discussed in the source.
Okay.
The claim is not one single letter, not one accent mark could be changed without it being noticed. The system they developed to preserve this ancient knowledge was incredibly meticulous, so rigorous that any tiny error, even a slight change in pronunciation, would be caught. They were preserved in such a way that the claim is the original Vedas are still available today, exactly as they were. Not just the words, but the pronunciation, the intonation, the musicality of it. It wasn't just about memorizing lines. It involved this complex system of checks and balances. People memorized the mantras in multiple different patterns, different sequences. It's called pataviti. Imagine reciting the words of a sentence forwards, then backwards, then pairing them up in different ways, skipping words in set patterns, like intricate mathematical sequences using words.
So different people learn different patterns of the same text. How did that help?
Precisely. You'd have different groups specializing in different pathas or recitation styles. They'd pass these down religiously generation after generation. So if any doubt ever arose about a word, a syllable, or even a tone, whether it should be high or low, they could cross-reference between the different pathas. Any discrepancy would immediately signal an error, made it virtually impossible for changes to creep in unnoticed. Even a tiny shift in tone would be flagged. Now, eventually, they were written down, scripted, but the oral tradition, this intense memorization and recitation, continued alongside, and it still exists in parts of India today. The source notes that while North India faced a lot of invasions and disruption, South India was relatively more stable, allowing these traditions to continue unbroken for a very, very long time. And the source makes a strong point. No other book, anywhere in the world, had anything close to this level of rigorous, built-in, cross-verifying preservation, which, it argues, gives the Vedas a unique claim to authenticity, to being unchanged from their origin.
That is truly incredible. The sheer human effort, the discipline involved, it's staggering. Even Western scholars, people like Max Muller, who were initially quite skeptical, couldn't help but be amazed by it. They called it a wonder of human memory and dedication. Over 20,000 verses preserved like that. It really is something.
A testament to a unique method of knowledge transmission, definitely.
Okay, so we've talked about the origin, the preservation, but let's get into the content itself more. Beyond the spiritual side, what exactly is supposed to be in these Vedas? Is this claim of them being comprehensive really supported in the source?
Oh, absolutely. The source argues they're incredibly comprehensive. One key aspect is that Vedic mantras are said to have multiple layers of meaning. They can mean different things depending on the context you're analyzing them in. And that's how, the argument goes, the seeds of all kinds of knowledge are packed within them. You often have to interpret words based on their original Sanskrit root, meaning not just how the word might be used commonly later on, for instance, the word cow. Today it mostly means cow. But in the Vedas, its root suggests something that moves. So depending on the mantra, it could refer to the earth, or rays of light, or water, or speech, or senses. Not just a cow. You need context.
Okay, so it requires deep interpretation, not just literal translation.
Exactly. And because of this depth, the source claims the Vedas contain not just spiritual wisdom, but heaps of practical knowledge too. We're talking science, technology, medicine, health practices, rules for society, family life, economics, mathematics, finance, even guidelines for research and education. The source flat out states there isn't any subject not touched upon or included in seed form.
Wow, so not just philosophy, but actual, science and tech. Can you give some examples mentioned?
Yes, the source is quite specific. It says they contain the fundamentals for fields like physics, chemistry, sociology, math, theology, engineering. It makes claims, for instance, that you can find detailed information or principles related to building ships and even airplanes, or at least the foundational concepts of aerodynamics and construction. It mentions the basics of mathematics, including the decimal system we use today. Concepts related to gravity and electricity are also said to be present.
That's pretty mind-blowing if true. Decimal system, airplanes. It really forces you to reconsider what ancient knowledge might have meant.
It certainly challenges conventional timelines of discovery, according to this perspective, and they break it down by Veda too, roughly. The Rigveda is mainly about understanding all things, physical and spiritual knowledge itself. The Yajurveda focuses more on actions, the rituals, the duties, the karma recommended for humans. The Samaveda deals primarily with devotion, contemplation, worship, the emotional and meditative connection. And the Atharvaveda is often described as more practical, applying the knowledge from the other three. It covers things like medicine, spells, daily life applications, drawing from knowledge, action, and devotion.
That range is just vast, covering pretty much every aspect of existence, from the cosmic to the everyday. Well, this has been an absolutely incredible deep dive exploring the Vedas, divine source of eternal knowledge based on our source material. We started with Veda, meaning knowledge, and went all the way to how this eternal wisdom was supposedly revealed, perfectly preserved, and how it's claimed to hold insights into, well, almost everything. Spirituality, science, society.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Consider the core claim: a knowledge system said to predate human language and history as we know it. Yet, according to its proponents and this source, it contains blueprints or principles for advanced concepts and covers every area of life. What might that suggest to you about the nature of knowledge itself? Where does it truly come from? How can it be accessed or transmitted across millennia?
That is definitely a thought-provoking question to leave you all with, something to really mull over. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Vedas. We hope you feel a bit more informed, maybe a little more intrigued about the sheer depth and mystery surrounding this ancient body of wisdom.